Welcome to our game today, which is between Bobby Fischer and Miguel Najdorf from 1962. A wonderful victory by Bobby Fischer against Miguel Najdorf in the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. So what a way to dominate your opponent by beating them in the variation that's actually named after them. So we get e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3. We get a6, the Najdorf variation. And this, of course, is planning to push to b5 later in the thing. Now, often quite common moves here by white are bishop to e3, bishop to g5, bishop to e2, or bishop to c4. But in this game, we get Bobby Fischer playing h3, which decides to take away the square here for the knight to jump in. And we get b5 by Najdorf. We get knight to d5. And then we get bishop to b7. So we get knight takes on f6 and g takes f6. And in the game, we get c4, explosive for some. And after an exchange of pawns and the light square bishop for white developing, then black plays bishop takes e4. And Bobby Fischer plays a very interesting move here of castles, which, you know, may seem counterintuitive. You can play rook to g8, and all of a sudden you're attacking down this open file. Now, in the game, we get d5 by black, which is attacking our light square bishop here. Of course, if you leave this light square bishop, then queen to h5 is an annoying threat to play. And there's some interesting lines which I looked at in the analysis. If black plays somewhat of a waiting move, bishop to f7 check, sacking the bishop for the gain of a pawn can be a very interesting line, which actually can lead to some very accurate play by black, or they could actually end up losing their queen because of this very nicely placed knight here, which could potentially fork the king and the knight. But none of this happens in the game. Very simply, we get d5 by Najdorf, and here, instead of moving his bishop from danger, Bobby Fischer plays what is actually classified as a mistake of rook to e1. Instead, try and play principal chess, get your rook on the file where the king is, and good things will happen. And so in the game, we get e5. Now, all of a sudden, Najdorf is now attacking two pieces, so Bobby Fischer is for sure going to lose one. Is that the case? And what happens here? Well, let's say if we get d takes on c4, well then rook takes on e4. So you exchange the bishops, no big deal. So what instead if we got something like this? This is something that I probably would look at myself, is when the rook is here, we're going to win a pawn, and after you take here, with a check by black with the rook, you drop back and then you take the bishop. And here black is in a very comfortable position, better on the board and up some points of material, up 2 pawns. And so black can look forward to a good game despite not being very developed. But in the game, we get, after e5, we get the move of queen to a4, checking the king. And here you could play something like queen to d7, but you have this very nice move here for white, which is bishop to b5, pinning the queen to the king, meaning you have to take and give up the rook. And you can't even take the knight back here on d4 to get compensation, because your knight on b8 is hanging with check. So that would have been a tricky variation. So maybe perhaps because of this, Najdorf plays knight to d7, and yet again we've got two pieces hanging for white. So what is the move here? Bobby Fischer finds a brilliant move here. Can you find a brilliant move? What was he thinking? Well, he plays a rather wonderful and slightly counterintuitive move, you may think, of rook takes e4. So now we've got the bishop hanging, we've got the knight hanging, and we've got the rook hanging. So he's going for an exchange sack if it's accepted by Najdorf, and Najdorf accepts the exchange sack. Now, of course, this enables Bobby Fischer then to play the move of knight to f7. And here we see his attack is becoming very, very tricky. Now, Najdorf then plays bishop to c5, trying to pin this to the king. We get knight to g7 check, we get king to e7, knight to f5 check, king to e8, and then we play bishop to e3. And so Najdorf trades off the two bishops, but as we look at this, we see that Najdorf is up 3 points of material, but when we look at what's developed, Najdorf has got a knight off of the back file, whereas Fischer has a queen, a bishop, and a knight all also in the game. So Bobby Fischer here plays after b6, after Najdorf plays b6, we get Bobby Fischer plays rook to d1, and now with a double attack on this knight, Najdorf plays rook to a7, then after rook to d6 we get queen to d8, and here Bobby Fischer is really turning the screw in this position. So we get queen to b3, lining up the double attack on the pawn, and then we get queen to c7, and here we get taking the pawn on f7 with check, we get king to d8, and it's in this position that Bobby Fischer plays a really wonderful move. Can you find the move that he played that made Najdorf resign? Well, in this position he played a very nice move of bishop to e6, double attack on this knight. Of course, if you don't move the queen, you're going to lose it, and you're going to lose the knight on top of it. So the game could have continued with something like queen to d6, knight takes on the queen, we get king to c7, queen to a3, rook to b8, knight to f5, rook to b6, attacking, of course, our bishop here, but then queen to e7. Computer says the best move is rook to e6, and then after queen to e6 the game is completely over at this stage,